Marc Smith, thank you so much for joining me on the Fact Up podcast. Thanks for taking time out of your busy day.
Oh yes, it's so busy right now.
You're not kidding, man. Normally, we'd be talking travel destinations, hotspots, where you've been, where you plan on going, funny kind of experiences along the way. But the times are dictating another sort of conversation. Unfortunately, these days, you run your very own kind of digital travel and lifestyle magazine. Mark My Travels. Your content is amazing. It's inspirational. I love watching it. Love reading it.
Oh, thanks.
For those who don't know, what can visitors expect to see and read on your website?
So I'm pretty much the average guy. I'm 50. I'm single,
Get
so
out of here, 50. Get
I
out
am.
of here.
I am. I'm 50.
Come on.
But I pretty much travel solo. And when I was younger, the idea of solo travel was just, there was no possible way that would be something I would have ever considered. However, I've actually grown to love it. In fact, it's my favorite way to travel. I do love having friends pop in for a couple of days of a trip. But I actually really like to be on my own. And so I actually think in this time that we're going through right now, I've actually been training for self-isolation for quite a while.
Gotcha.
So for like the last 4 or 5 years, but yeah, no, I mean, so I love to eat, I love to drink, I love to explore local. That's always a big passion of mine. So for example, if I'm in Peterborough in the Kawarthas, I'm, drinking local beer. I'm trying to find the local spirit distillers. There's a winery in the Kawarthas, for example. So I'm really about experiencing that. I don't do chain restaurants. I always want the small independents. So those are the things I look for. And in terms of activities and adventure, I like to mix things between things that cost, for example, a helicopter flight to see the volcanoes on the big island of Hawaii, because, you need to do that at least once in your life,
Right.
with, walking the Petroglyph National Park, and discovering those on your own that cost nothing other than, access to get there by car. So, so I would say my adventures are pretty soft. I'm not hiking Machu Picchu. I'm not doing anything of those.
Right.
So I think everything that pretty much the average person could do: kayaking, love local independent coffee shops. In fact, that is usually the big thing that I'm looking for, is like, where are the coffee shops that I need to check out?
Mm-hmm. That's why I really relate to your content, because I personally, I'm an only child. I grew up with just my mom, so it's and single parent. So it was kind of trudging along single-handedly for a lot of my life. But without my partner's going to watch this, and no offense to my partner, but solo travel is therapeutic, man. It's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
And I've written personally extensively on it. It's liberating. It's therapeutic, and you really, if you have the courage to look in the mirror, you learn a lot about yourself. And there's no better way to do that than through travel.
Absolutely. Well, if you think about it, so oftentimes when I'll go to a restaurant, I remember this actually. I was on the first trip I did to Hawaii, and it was the island of Kauai, and I was at a Merriman's, and I was actually visiting 4 restaurants that night. So I was basically doing poo-poos at every restaurant,
Right.
and and I was like, there's no way I can eat every single thing I order, because I ordered a couple of dishes from 8 places. And so I went, when I got to Merriman's, I sat at the bar. I didn't sit at a table. And instead of sitting alone all the way over to with empty seats, I actually sat next to a couple and ended up starting to talk to them. And I asked them what they would be interested in trying. So basically I bought the poo-poos for all of us to share.
Sweet.
Had a great, got some great conversations. And I also got to hear, because they'd been on the island for a while, what they'd done and so I find that, like, for example, dining solo is actually an opportunity for me to reach out and meet new people. And I would never have done that if I was there with a friend.
Exactly, and that's the beauty of it. And if you've got any sort of, that's the ironic thing, we as people, I find, we're social beings. Obviously, we want to be around people. We want to converse. We want to be involved. We want to be included. And this is kind of now the opposite of what's happening. So it
Yeah.
kind of leads me to my question. COVID-19, global pandemic, here we are. It's affecting all of our lives and will do so for the foreseeable future anyway. How has the pandemic affected you on a personal level and on a professional level?
Personally, it hasn't really affected me that much. Like I said, so I'm a no fixed address
Hmm.
lifestyle. So I've been doing some family visiting anyways for the last little while. So I've been back visiting my mom, who obviously is older than me, but so I've been visiting her for a little bit of time, and I was doing some reassessing on some plans and some work that I was doing, and constant traveling was difficult in terms of kind of like doing that critical thinking on the blog and what I was going to do. So it was nice to be able to be in one spot for a chunk of time and really deep dive on that.
Hmm.
So for me personally, I'm actually great. You know, surrounded
Good.
by
That's great.
family, yeah, surrounded by family again, like because I've traveled and in that nomadic lifestyle, my core friend group was already separated by distance from me for the last 4 years.
Yeah.
So for me, I've been communicating by phone, by FaceTime, by email, by text, by
Right.
Instagram with them anyways.
Right.
So this is just business as usual.
Right.
Professionally, completely stopped in my tracks. I've done a couple of small freelance production on my blog has gone to nil as well. For me, I've gone through a number of crises in my earlier years, and so I'm always a big believer in self-care first, my business second. So for me, I've taken this time to so I've been self-isolated for I guess I'm going on day 21 now,
Hmm. Hmm.
um, for obvious safety reasons. So I think, and for me, it's been the first week was I just Netflixed and chilled.
Hmm.
Read some books. Like I feel no guilt about my productivity being at zero. I
Hmm.
don't have any issues with that. So whatever. The second week, as you know, I'm on the board of the Travel Media Association of Canada, and some work that I had been doing previous was ready to launch. So we actually launched a webinar that I hosted yesterday. So last week I spent a lot of time, and this week spent a lot of time doing some volunteer work for colleagues and stuff like that and getting that ready. So hosted the webinar yesterday, but I really don't see any professional work coming up in the future. And so next week I'm at the stage where I've kind of caught up on the books, and there's not quite as many Netflix series I want to watch. So I'm going to get to the stage next week where I think I'm actually going to start working on some projects, cleaning up the blog. I did a redesign
Hmm.
um, a month ago, but I haven't actually finished all of the tweaking. So that's probably what's going to happen next week. And I've been thinking about launching a podcast, but don't necessarily think I want to launch a travel podcast in the middle of a pandemic. So I'm trying
Right.
to think of ways that I can do that in a way that's sensitive and relevant and will provide value to people.
That's the thing. It's sensitivity to the time, and it's also, for someone like you who is always on the go, right? You're here, you're there. Um, Coping and adapting to a time like this. Uh, Sometimes there is such a thing as the end of the internet, so to speak, where you're always kind of thinking of different things to kind of cope and adapt to. But food, travel, lifestyle, all part of kind of who you are, what you do. Immense damage and kind of disruption worldwide, especially to the travel industry. Um, you
But
know,
but just you know,
sure.
people get overwhelmed with
Mhm.
the doom and gloom, and I
Yep.
think that's what. And this is so with the webinar that we hosted yesterday, and I know that you were on it.
Hmm.
And I think one of the things that if you were to ask anyone who's known me for more than 5 minutes, I am always positive. I'm always upbeat. I generally have a smile on my face. In fact,
Yep.
it's a lot easier for me to smile than it is for me to frown.
Right.
And kind of like my personal byline is that I can find the awesome in everything.
Right.
So there is a lot of stuff that's not going well right now.
Yep.
However, every challenge is an opportunity if you have the right perspective. So there are
Totally.
opportunities, there are ways, we are going to get out of this, and there is an opportunity for us to pivot that you couldn't do when you were running at 100 miles an hour. And I
Right.
had started that process already, but a lot of it has been just thinking. And for me, I need to be kind of centered and quiet to be able to think of like what the next steps are, because like I said, there was, before I kind of came to sort of for the family visit, I had done I think 6 or 7 trips back to back, and some of them were not your average 3-day trip. Some of them were quite long.
Mhm.
So I had just been on the go and then writing stories and producing and then looking for the next one and all the rest of the stuff. So
Mhm.
there was no downtime to actually think. And so I think one of the silver linings, for lack of a better phrase, is that this gives everybody an opportunity. I know lots of people are taking courses. Like for me, for example, on the tweaking of the blog redesign, there's a lot of stuff. I'm not a coder.
Right.
I wouldn't even say I'm a writer. I'm a storyteller, and I just happen to be typing it on a keyword. I don't have any formal training or anything like that. So for me, this is a great opportunity because some of the changes that I want to do in the blog are a little complicated and I'm going to need to take some time. And so
Mhm.
I think there's a good opportunity to take some SEO courses, to take some Gutenberg, the new format for WordPress, all
Mhm.
those things. So there's some time for me, how to use WP Page Builder, which
Yeah.
if you know how
Yeah.
to do that stuff, it's easy. But if you
Yeah.
don't, it's
That's
nice
it.
to be able to do that. So that's kind of some of the things, and of course, I'm doubling down on my volunteerism with the Travel Media Association of Canada, because I think a lot of our members really need a ray of sunshine and need that, that something to do. And I think that that's the opportunity for us.
I agree with you. And that was kind of actually leading into my next question, because there's a lot of maybe kind of downtime where people are reinventing themselves, perhaps at this point. They're taking the opportunity to pick up hobbies that they've put off for so long, or they've been wanting to do something professionally even for such a long time, and now is the time. If I'm a banker, engineer, um, you know, bricklayer, whatever the case, whatever the profession, but I want to switch gears, pivot, and get into a travel media industry, be it travel writing, food photography, which you also are very much involved with. What is the advice that you'd give someone who wants to pivot into the travel industry? Because we will rebound as a travel
Yeah.
industry, and it will become stronger, in my opinion. What do you tell the person who wants to pivot and maybe get into this business? One piece
Okay.
of advice.
Yeah. So I'm going to the exact opposite of what I did,
Okay.
which is build it while you have secure income.
Right.
So because if you can do it if you can build an Instagram following, a blog follow, and to be honest with you, I would focus on building a blog and having Instagram as part of it, but not your only platform, because better to own your content than to have somebody else own it,
Mhm.
the hosting of it anyways. But really use the opportunity. If you can do it and do it successfully when it's on the side of your desk, build it to the place where you can then transition to it full time. And I often find that, people you're going to work, you're actually going to work harder when you're full time than when it's on the side of your desk.
Agreed.
So if you don't like it after 3 months, when it's on the side of your desk, you are really not going to like it when you're full time, because it is not easy to go from 0 to 10,000. Unless you have some magic unicorn silver bullet kind of, like something happens and you go viral, which happens 1 in a billion times.
Yep.
It's a lot of work, and it's, consistency. So I would say don't don't jump ship
Right.
until you've got somewhere soft to land.
Right. That's a great piece of advice, because a lot of people will look at the TikToks and the Snapchats of the world and say, well, that person's doing that. They have 1 million views. I can do that. Just like that, it'll happen for me too. And it's a rarity, obviously.
Well, and as we're seeing
Right.
right now, all of those, a lot of people that were Instagram heavy, a lot of their brand deals have fallen through, a lot of their
Right.
ambassadorships are on hold, all of those things, right? And so it's also about, just really understanding, and did they have a genuine connection with their audience? I mean,
Right.
going forward, brands are going to be much more aligned with people that actually have a connection with their audience. And so if, like, for example, on Instagram. I think I'm about 5,000, 4,000 followers. It's not huge, but it's but I think that, being able to connect and communicate with those people and actually being engaged with them is better than having 100,000 followers that are just randomly following and liking stuff.
And or purchased.
Yes, the micro influencer and stuff like
Right.
that. So in this situation, small can be mighty and build from there.
Right. Switching gears for a second, and we're talking about the travel industry kind of rebounding in time. What do you think big companies in the travel industry, be it cruise ships, airlines, railway companies, etc., what do they need to do in order to reinforce a peace of mind to the consumer that travel is once again safe down the road?
Right. So I think first off, they need to have dealt with this properly. I think companies that made mistakes and price gouged or didn't offer refunds or made it difficult to get a refund or a credit. I think companies that answered this challenge well will bounce out of this quicker and faster and stronger than those companies that had missteps in the early stages. In a previous life, in a previous career, I actually was involved with a food service company that had that survived a hepatitis A outbreak. And the reason that we survived was because we were upfront, transparent, and in front of every single thing that happened before anybody else. And we actually, in record time, were back up to same-day sales that we'd had before, because we were, transparent and actively trying to solve the situation and work with our customer base. We put our customers first and our staff first, and then we worried about the business after the fact. And I think that that's going to be the same here.
I don't want to put you on the spot, but you don't have to name names, but are there any companies that you can think of off the top of your head that have done just that properly?
Well, to be honest with you, I have not really tried to pay much attention. Okay. Because it's part of my self-care. Mm-hmm. I limit myself to about 10 minutes of COVID news a day. Anything more than that, and all of a sudden the heart starts pounding, and and the situation in the States is different than Canada and vice versa and everything else. So I've seen a few companies do a couple of things, and I don't want to name them because I think that they probably just didn't realize, or maybe they didn't have the right team or whatever, but and that's fine. And but I know there's a grocery store, for example, in Toronto that's very well known that made a mistake about overcharging for sanitation product and stuff like that. And so I think, and people are going to remember that. Right. That's not necessarily travel, but stupid mistakes can cost people and companies their brand identity down the road. And it's really hard to crawl back from a mistake like that. So, but companies I think that have done really well, I think Airbnb did an amazing job with their refund policies. I think Air Canada and WestJet have done the best they could. I mean, those are the two big players, travel-wise, airline-wise in our country. I think it's devastating to their business, and I think they've done a fairly decent job of responding immediately and adjusting. And I think there's always room for improvement, but I think generally speaking, they've done a fairly decent job as well.
Airbnb sticks out because my food tours are on Airbnb, and we constantly get updates from Airbnb, the CEO and different kind of marketing representatives from around the continent and markets that they represent. They've actually extended the refund season up until at least April 30th. So my food tours are shut down. The initial thing was them getting started up on April 6th, funny enough. But because everything has just escalated so quickly, it's now at least April 30th. I presume that to be much, much further down the road.
Yeah,
but I agree with you.
I think June. I think we're looking at June
easily. But I appreciate as a client of theirs, as someone who hosts something on their platform, I appreciate that transparency and that communication every step of the way. Yeah. And you're right. I agree with you. People remember that in times of strife like this more than any other time. But that said, the government response to all this, especially to small business and just people in general who are out of work, or have families that they cannot support as well as they could in the past. Your opinion, the small business kind of game plan and the $2,000 a month for each person. Is it fair? Is it enough? What was missing, if anything?
Yeah, no, you know what? I mean, not all of the details on that program are out and it hasn't launched yet, but I think that Canada in general has done a fairly good job. I mean, I just happen to be in BC at the moment, and I've seen a little bit of what's happening in Ontario, and I think BC has done an absolute brilliant job of communicating and data sharing, and it's factual. They're not shying away from speaking the truth, but at the same time, they're not trying to over-inflame. They're trying to, keep a common sense, attitude and approach, and just to just to reinforce to everybody that, that we are all in this together. And by doing a lot of actions early and smartly, that will come out of this quicker. But I think the federal government, I think the provincial governments are doing a fairly good job. Certain programs do and don't apply depending on what your business model is. So I'm not really sure yet how it's going to help or assist me. I'm in a situation where I'm not necessarily that stressed about it. It's going to be what it's going to be. I've reached out and, had some, for example, I reached out to Rogers to make sure that over the next few months, while things happen, that there will be some, my cell phone bill will not be cut off if I'm late with a payment or something like that. So little things like that. But I think it's just a question of staying calm. What's the famous line, keep calm and
keep calm and carry on.
Exactly. And so, I had already minimalized my life and my expenditures to a fairly need basis, not or these are the things that I need. So obviously, like a cell phone bill, a Netflix account, a few
right.
But I didn't have a lot of other stuff. I know that in BC, for example, there was just notice that BC is reducing hydro rates. There's going to be forgiving them for 3 months for small businesses. So there's a lot of efforts like that. And because I write here, I've set up a little home office for this period, but normally every day I would wake up, grab my laptop and head to a local coffee shop with my Americano and sit there and start typing away. Well, of course, the local coffee shop here in town that I go to has been closed, and I've become quite good friends with the cafe owner. And I know that, she's got coolers and, a lot of, it's heavy duty refrigeration, everything else. She shut everything off, but I know the fact that she won't have a hydro bill for the next 3 months is going to greatly help, her to be able to reopen and not have to worry about those bills. So I think that there's a lot of things. I think that what we know now, we didn't know 3 weeks ago. So I think a lot of, it does take some time, but I think I think the government is, and I think Canada is fiscally okay to be able to support us. And, and we're just gonna all have to band together.
That's what we've been doing, right? And looking down the road, because you're also in the food photography world, you're in the travel writing world, you're in the lifestyle world, obviously. What does the future hold as far as travel and dining? What are experiences going to be like down the road as far as, what's the new normal in a dining experience or in a travel experience?
Yeah. So I actually hope something, what I hope comes out of this is that I really hope that people remember the support local movement that's really going. People are going to the little small businesses and trying their best to support them. They're off, like for example, in Langley, there's a gourmet food store called Well Seasoned. And they prepare foods, but they're also a importer of, food items, and they do cooking classes. And that obviously the cooking classes are not on. Obviously they limit the amount of people that will come into the store to shop for items and things like that. But they are making foods for people that can come up, or delivery and things like that. So I hope that people will remember this love local movement that's been going on. I think that, and I'm not Kreskin and I have no information than anybody else does, but I believe strongly that in-country staycations are going to rise, at least for the first year. I think people, I just spoke to a friend this morning who got laid off from her job, and she's temporarily laid off. She will be brought back, but she's used her vacation time for the next month so that she's on full salary until May to sort of decrease the amount that she's taking a hit. So I think a lot of people are using their vacations and will not necessarily have, the 2-week or 3-week or 4-week vacation that they perhaps might have had. So I think they're going to do lots of 3-day getaways, or, things like that. But I think internationally and within Canada as well, airlines, hotels, all of these places are going to want people back in their destinations. And I think there's going to be a lot of discounts to incentivize people to like book that trip. So if you are able to still have a bit of, vacation time left and some money in the bank, there may be some really great opportunities down the road to actually do that trip that may have been on your bucket list, that instead of it being a $5,000 trip, it may now be a $3,000 trip. So you never know. Or you may get a price may be similar, but there may be a whole lot more perks thrown in. So, so I think there will be opportunities when this comes up. It's just a question of who can take advantage of them, and, and the same thing on the small business side, to be ready for them. I mean, I'm starting to think about, okay, all my trips for this year are canceled, all the rest of the things. So I'm starting to think about, okay, so maybe I don't necessarily want to do those exact same trips again. What are the places and destinations that I want to focus on? Because I think that's where my audience is going to be going.
Absolutely. And you know what? Great minds, my friend, because that was my next question. It's hopefully the prices for airlines match and or especially kind of go below the price that, for example, if it's cheaper to fly to Edmonton than it is to Paris, I'll go to Edmonton because I've never been to Edmonton. I'd love to see Edmonton, right? But in the past, as you know, it's cheaper to fly, to Paris and London or Madrid than it is to Vancouver from Toronto. And that is a big deterrent. Why would I want to go to Vancouver? No offense, I love Vancouver, but if I can go to Paris for the same, if not less money, I might as well just go to Paris. Sure, I'm probably going to pay more for the hotel and the experience will be more expensive, but it's Paris. But you sincerely believe that I think I'm on the same page as you. Sincerely believe that travel within the country is going to rise, and experiences will be more relished as a staycation, as opposed to especially going down to the States or maybe across the world, maybe on a plane for a little while, at least a year.
Yeah, I think there's going to be lots of opportunities, and it's really, what are these destinations going to do? Are they going to, during the 2008, 2009 financial crisis, a lot of businesses shuttered their marketing and PR efforts because that's where they thought they could save money really quickly. And then when they started coming out of it, they realized they'd lost all of the momentum that they previously built, and then they had to spend it. So a lot of money to get back there again. So I think a lot of destinations hopefully are keeping themselves active in people's minds and coming up with creative ways. I know that the national, Canada's parks, there are, I think, 17 parks that you can virtually visit. So little things like that. So I think that, and maybe in previous years, it was difficult to get a camping spot because of the rush and all the rest of it. So I think that also there's going to be a huge opportunity where there was over tourism for some destinations. I think that you may be able to get into some of these places where there's a little less people.
And going on shoulder season might even
which is my favorite
as well. Right?
Which is my favorite. Shoulder is my favorite time to travel to any.
I hear you.
place.
I hear you.
I do not need to be surrounded by kids at Disneyland.
Or selfie sticks, doing the old kind of cross, just kind of crossing your neck there, running into selfie sticks everywhere you go.
Exactly.
Marc Smith, thank you so much for joining me today. I know you're awesome, man. I love your stuff. I love your content. It was. I'm grateful to have had you on the show. Thank you for being a guest on the podcast. Support local, support local, support local, support each other.
Awesome. Well, I can't wait to, when I'm back in Toronto and we're going to do a Greek food town tour with you, because, the Danforth is one of my favorite places to be in Toronto. So
grateful to host you when you're in town.
I'm expecting you to point out a few places that I may have missed in the time that I lived close by there.
My pleasure.
Awesome. Thanks,
guys. It would be my pleasure. Marc Smith, thank you so much. Stay safe, and we'll talk soon.